Picture this, deep in the mist-shrouded rainforests of Central Africa, a place teeming with life, yet unforgiving to the vulnerable. A tiny human baby boy, Liam, barely a few months old, is lost, abandoned amidst unfolding chaos. His cries are a fragile whisper against the ancient chorus of the jungle. And who finds him? Not another human, but Imani, a magnificent mountain gorilla, her heart still aching from the recent loss of her own infant. What unfolds is an extraordinary saga of interspecies adoption, a testament to the fierce power of maternal love and the desperate, high-stakes human mission to bring one of their own back from a world not meant for him. In the heart of the Kivu National Park, a sprawling sanctuary of colossal trees, emerald undergrowth, and air thick with the scent of damp earth and unknown blossoms, lived a troop of mountain gorillas. Their existence was a harmonious rhythm, a daily ballet of foraging for succulent bamboo shoots and wild celery, playful tumbles amongst the juveniles, and long, peaceful grooming sessions under the dappled sunlight that pierced the dense canopy. Their undisputed leader was Kale, a silverback of immense size and gravitas, his watchful eyes missing nothing, his presence a silent promise of protection. Among them was Imani. Though not the oldest female, her gaze held a quiet wisdom, shadowed by a profound and recent sorrow. It hadn't been many moons since she'd cradled her own firstborn, a tiny, precious life, only to have it cruelly snatched away by a sudden, raging jungle fever. The emptiness it left was a raw, persistent ache in her powerful chest, a void that the sweetest fruits or the most boisterous games with the troop's youngsters couldn't quite fill. She moved with a gentle, almost melancholic grace, yet beneath that softness lay a fierce, protective spirit, honed by the unyielding laws of the wild. She often found herself watching the other mothers with their clinging infants, a pang of longing echoing within her. Unseen by the gorillas, yet a constant, subtle presence on the periphery of their vast territory, was a modest human research outpost. It wasn't much more than a few sturdy, camouflage cabins and a communications tower, but it was home to Dr. Anya Sharma and her dedicated team. They were like ghosts in the machine of the rainforest, studying the gorillas through long-range lenses, acoustic sensors, and occasional drone flights for aerial population counts. Their creed was non-interference, their mission to understand and protect these critically endangered primates. They knew the gorillas by name, recognized their individual personalities, and held a deep respect for their complex social structures. The region itself was a challenge. Treacherous mountain trails, unpredictable weather that could ground aircraft for days, and the ever-present risk of encountering dangers from venomous snakes to territorial forest elephants. One humid afternoon, the distant, familiar thrum of a Cessna aircraft, likely carrying supplies or personnel to a remote geological survey camp beyond the park, sputtered, coughed, and then faded into an ominous silence. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor, a muffled thud, was absorbed by the miles of dense foliage, unnoticed by most. Far from that unseen tragedy, but tragically connected, a long-simmering conflict between two remote villages, rooted in generations of disputed ancestral land rights and access to scarce resources, had violently erupted. In the ensuing chaos, a terrified young woman, Ada, clutching her infant son, Liam, fled into the suffocating embrace of the rainforest. Pursued, exhausted, and believing she was leading danger toward her child, she made an unimaginable choice. With a prayer tearing from her lips, she swaddled Liam as best she could in her most colorful wrap, placing him in a sheltered alcove of roots at the base of a giant strangler fig, near what she prayed was a path that might, just might, be used by someone merciful. Then, drawing the attention of her pursuers, she ran in a different direction, her heart shattering into a million pieces. A full turn of the sun later, Imani was foraging at the lush, verdant edge of her troop's current feeding grounds. The air was heavy, promising rain, and alive with the cacophony of unseen insects and distant bird calls. Suddenly, a sound, thin and reedy, pierced the familiar symphony of the jungle. It was a high-pitched, distress cry, so unlike the calls of any forest creature she knew, yet it vibrated through her with an almost painful familiarity, awakening the dormant, aching echoes of her own lost motherhood. Her natural caution warring with an irresistible pull, Imani moved through the tangled undergrowth with a silence that belied her size. Parting a curtain of broad leaves, she froze. There, nestled amongst the buttress roots, was Liam. His tiny face was flushed and streaked with tears, his small, starfish hands batting feebly at the humid air. He was impossibly small, utterly vulnerable, a fragile speck of pink against the rich, dark earth. Imani let out a low, questioning rumble, a sound deep in her chest. The baby's cries hitched, then resumed, a little weaker now. She extended a massive, leathery finger, its tip as broad as Liam's entire hand, and gently, tentatively, touched his soft, downy cheek. Liam, startled by the unexpected contact, let out a fresh, sharp wail. This was not one of her kind. It was a creature of smooth skin, almost no hair, and a strange, pungent scent. Yet, its utter helplessness, its desperate cries, bypassed all her ingrained wariness, all the natural boundaries of her species. The maternal instinct, so cruelly denied, surged through her with an overwhelming force. With infinite care, a gentleness that seemed impossible for her powerful frame, she scooped Liam into her arms. She cradled him against her warm, furry chest, the coarse black hairs a surprisingly soft cushion. Miraculously, his cries began to soften, then subsided into whimpers as he felt the warmth, the security, the steady, rhythmic thump-thump of her great heart. Imani looked around, a new, fierce alertness in her eyes. This small, strange, noisy creature was hers now. She would protect him. She turned and, with Liam nestled securely in the crook of her arm, began to make her way back towards the heart of her troop. The troop's reaction was immediate and tumultuous. The younger gorillas scattered in alarm, chattering nervously and peering from behind the legs of the larger females. The adult females gathered, grumbling and sniffing the air with suspicion. Kale, the silverback, erupted. He rose to his full, magnificent height, his silver saddle gleaming, and unleashed a series of deafening chest beats. Thump, 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 thump. A thunderous declaration of alarm and challenge. He charged towards Imani, not with intent to harm her, but to investigate this unprecedented disruption, his brow deeply furrowed, his massive canines briefly exposed in a warning grimace. He stopped a few feet from her, his gaze fixed on the pale, squirming bundle in her arms. He sniffed the air, his nostrils flaring, trying to categorize this alien scent. Imani stood her ground. She didn't cower, but she didn't challenge him either. She held Liam protectively, her body a shield, and let out a series of soft, plaintive grunts, a sound that spoke of her own recent loss and her desperate need to nurture. She looked directly at Kale, not with defiance, but with an appeal, a plea for understanding that transcended words. Perhaps Kale, in his own way, sensed the depth of her lingering grief. Perhaps his ancient wisdom recognized a life in peril, regardless of its strange form. Or perhaps he simply trusted Imani's usually sound judgment. After a long, heart-stopping moment, during which the entire troop seemed to hold its breath, Kale let out a low, guttural rumble. It wasn't exactly approval, but it was a grudging tolerance. He wouldn't harm this small, hairless one. Not while Imani so clearly claimed it. But he would watch. Oh, he would watch very, very closely. And so began Liam's improbable life as a member of a mountain gorilla troop. Imani was a mother transformed, her every moment consumed by her new charge. She created a soft nest of leaves and moss for him within her own larger night nest, keeping him warm against her ample body during the cool, mist-shrouded nights. She learned, through trial and error, to carry him as she moved through the dense undergrowth and even, cautiously, into the lower branches of the trees. One arm would be wrapped securely around his small form, while her other limbs navigated with practiced ease. She shared her food, meticulously mashing soft fruits like wild figs and tender bamboo pith with her fingers, trying to coax the strange, milky-smelling infant to eat. Liam, of course, couldn't thrive on such a diet. He would weakly turn his head away from the offered pulp, his cries growing more fretful as hunger gnawed at him. Yet, he clung to Imani with a surprising strength, his tiny fingers often tangled in her thick, coarse hair. Imani was fiercely protective. She would meticulously groom Liam, gently picking off insects or bits of debris from his delicate skin with her lips and fingers, much as she would her own kind. When the frequent tropical downpours drenched the forest, she would fashion a makeshift umbrella from large leaves or simply shield him with her own massive body. Once, a sleek, green vine snake, attracted by the warmth, slithered dangerously close to where Liam lay. Imani's gentle demeanor vanished in an instant. With a terrifying, explosive roar and a flash of bared teeth, she lunged, not to kill, but to terrify. The serpent, startled, vanished into the undergrowth as if by magic. The challenges, however, were mounting. Liam needed milk, a specific kind of nourishment Imani couldn't provide. His skin, unaccustomed to the constant dampness and friction, developed painful rashes. His cries, though often quieted by Imani's comforting presence, sometimes held a new note of weakness that deeply troubled her. The troop, guided by Kale's reluctant acceptance, had largely settled into a wary curiosity. The juveniles, emboldened by their inherent inquisitiveness, would sometimes creep closer, their dark eyes wide as they sniffed at the strange, pink creature, only to be gently but firmly nudged away by Imani. Back in the human world, the initial news of the downed Cessna had sent ripples of alarm through the small expatriate and research community. Ranger David Miller, a rugged, pragmatic American conservationist who had dedicated 2 decades of his life to Kivu, coordinated the initial search and rescue. The plane wreckage was eventually located in a remote, almost inaccessible ravine. A heartbreaking scene, no survivors. But the manifest listed a pilot and a researcher and a small, unofficial passenger, a baby, mentioned in a last-minute, informal communication from the pilot to the remote survey camp he was flying to. They were bringing the researcher's infant nephew out for a brief visit. Hope, already fragile, began to crumble. Then, days later, a traumatized villager who had managed to escape the escalating conflict zone reached a ranger patrol. His fragmented, fearful account spoke of a young woman, Ada, fleeing with an infant towards the deep forest just before the worst of the fighting engulfed her village. Suddenly, the focus of the search shifted, intensified. Could the baby from the plane and this village baby be one and the same? Or were there 2 lost infants? David, working closely with Dr. Anya Sharma, whose knowledge of the guerrilla territories was unparalleled, pored over maps, satellite imagery, and GPS tracking data from collared animals in a desperate attempt to narrow down the search area. They deployed thermal imaging drones, organized ground patrols that battled through near-impenetrable jungle, and interviewed anyone who might have seen anything, however insignificant. Each day that passed without a sign of Liam felt like a year, the chances of finding a lone infant alive in this wilderness shrinking with every sunrise. Then came the breakthrough. Late one evening, in the dim, mosquito-buzzed operations room at the research station, a junior analyst, bleary-eyed from hours of staring at drone footage, let out a sharp exclamation. "Dr. Sharma, Ranger Miller, you have to see this." Now, on the large monitor, a grainy, heat signature image, captured from high above the canopy, showed a familiar cluster of warmth, Imani's troop. But as the analyst zoomed in on one particular figure, a collective gasp sucked the air from the room. There, nestled unmistakably in the arms of a large female gorilla. Imani, Anya recognized her instantly by a distinctive scar on her shoulder, was a smaller, paler heat signature. It was too small, its shape too different to be a gorilla infant. "My God," David whispered, leaning so close to the screen his nose almost touched it. Is that what I think it is?" Anya, her heart hammering against her ribs, her scientific mind struggling to process the impossible, magnified the image further. "It has to be," she breathed, her voice trembling. "Look at the way she's holding it. That's Imani. She lost her baby, remember? Just a few months ago." The discovery sent an electrifying shockwave through the small team. A human child, alive, seemingly adopted by a wild mountain gorilla. It was beyond anything they could have imagined. A miracle wrapped in an incredibly dangerous and delicate dilemma. Their mission had transformed in an instant. It was no longer just search and rescue. It was now a high-stakes, interspecies negotiation with potentially lethal consequences. They had to retrieve Liam, who was surely weakening, but they absolutely could not risk harming Imani or precipitating a conflict with Kale and the rest of the troop, already pushed to the brink by human encroachment. Anya and David handpicked a small, highly experienced team, a veterinarian skilled in primate tranquilization, a last resort, and two of their most seasoned trackers. Their initial plan was one of cautious, direct approach, hoping to somehow coax or distract Imani. It failed spectacularly, as they moved quietly through the undergrowth, trying to get within a safe visual distance. Kale, ever vigilant, detected them. With a roar that seemed to shake the very trees, he charged. It was a bluff, a terrifying display of power designed to intimidate, not to kill, but it was utterly effective. He crashed through the vegetation, a blackened silver avalanche of muscle and fury, stopping just yards short of the frozen humans, beating his chest in a booming crescendo before retreating to stand guard before his troop. Imani, clutching Liam even tighter, melted back into the protective circle of the other females, her eyes wide with alarm. "Well," David muttered, wiping a bead of sweat from his temple as they regrouped at a safe distance. "That's plan A out the window. We get any closer, and Kale will take it as a direct threat. Tranquilizing Imani in this terrain, with the baby, it's far too risky. She could fall, harm Liam, or the dart could miss and hit another gorilla. The whole troop would panic." Anya nodded, her expression grim. She felt a deep empathy for Imani. She's not just being protective, she's being a mother. In her mind, Liam is her baby. We're the threat. We have to somehow change that perception. And Liam, he can't survive on what she's feeding him. We are running out of time. Their new strategy became one of patience, habituation, and non-threatening presence. For several grueling days, they established a discreet observation camp just outside the troop's typical foraging radius, always downwind. They made sure the gorillas could see them, hear their quiet movements, and smell their scent, but they never advanced, never made direct eye contact for too long. They left out small offerings of high-value fruits, ripe bananas, sweet mangoes, items they knew the gorillas occasionally raided from nearby, human unoccupied, forest clearings, placing them in neutral territory, then retreating. Slowly, cautiously, the gorillas, led by the bolder youngsters, began to investigate these peace offerings. Anya, drawing on her years of studying gorilla vocalizations, would sometimes emit soft, guttural belch vocalizations, sounds of contentment and reassurance in the gorilla lexicon. Kale's charges became less frequent, his chest beating more ritualistic than truly aggressive. He was still wary, intensely so, but a sliver of tolerance seemed to be emerging. Imani, too, would often sit at the edge of the troop, watching the humans with her intelligent, searching eyes, Liam always cradled securely. The critical moment, when it came, was precipitated by Liam himself. He had grown noticeably weaker. His cries, when they came, were faint, reedy, and heartbreakingly distressed. From their observation post, Anya watched through binoculars as Imani anxiously nuzzled him, trying to soothe him, patting his back with a massive, gentle hand, a look of profound concern etched on her expressive face. Then Liam, perhaps in a moment of fading consciousness, or driven by a primal, olfactory memory of his own kind, let out a particularly pitiful whimper and turned his small head, almost imperceptibly, in the direction of the human camp. It was now or never. Anya made a decision that went against every protocol of distant observation. Handing her binoculars to David, she said softly, "I'm going to try something. Stay here. No sudden moves unless things go very wrong." She stepped out into a small, sun-dappled clearing that lay between their camp and the guerrillas, alone and unarmed. She moved slowly, deliberately, making herself appear as small and unthreatening as possible. Then, she sank to her knees in the damp earth, averting her gaze in a gesture of submission, and began to hum. It was a simple, wordless lullaby her own mother used to hum to her, a melody that spoke of comfort, of peace, of safety. Imani, startled by the solitary human figure, tensed. Liam stirred weakly in her arms. Kale let out a low, warning growl, and several females moved closer to Imani. But Anya remained kneeling, her voice a soft, continuous thread of melody in the tense silence, her eyes downcast. After what felt like an eternity, punctuated only by the buzzing of insects and the distant calls of birds, Imani took a hesitant step towards the edge of her group, Liam still cradled. She looked from Anya's bowed head to the baby in her arms, then back to Anya. There was an almost unbearable conflict in her gaze, confusion, deep-seated suspicion, but also, Anya thought, a flicker of desperate maternal worry for a child she instinctively knew she couldn't fully sustain. David, seeing a fragile opening, nodded almost imperceptibly to Sarah, the veterinarian, who had a specially prepared bottle of warm, electrolyte-rich infant formula and a soft, clean blanket ready. Together, David and Sarah began to move forward, with excruciating slowness, mirroring Anya's submissive posture, their hands open and visible. No sudden movements, no direct stares, only an aura of profound calm. Imani watched them approach, her grip on Liam, if anything, tightening. Kale grumbled a warning but didn't charge, his own intelligent eyes assessing this unprecedented situation. Anya continued her soft humming, slowly raising her eyes to meet Imani's, trying to convey only empathy and shared concern. Then came the moment that would be seared into the memory of everyone present. Liam, with a last surprising surge of energy, whimpered again and reached out a tiny, trembling hand, not towards Imani, but vaguely, instinctively, towards the scent and sound of his own species. Imani looked down at Liam's small, outstretched hand, then at Anya's gentle, pleading face. She let out a soft, mournful rumble, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very depths of her being. She had found him, saved him, loved him as her own. He was her child. But perhaps in that moment of pure, unadulterated interspecies communication, a primal truth resonated within her. This small, fragile, milk-scented being belonged with them, with these other strange, hairless creatures who smelled of safety to the infant. With a slowness that was agonizing to watch, as if each movement tore a piece from her heart, Imani gently, oh so gently, lowered Liam to the soft, mossy forest floor, placing him carefully in the space between herself and Anya. She nuzzled his head one last time with her great, leathery nose, a soft, huffing grunt escaping her, a sound of profound farewell. Then she backed away, step by painful, reluctant step, her sorrowful eyes never leaving the tiny form on the ground. Anya, her own eyes blurring with tears for the gorilla mother's sacrifice, moved forward with equally measured slowness. She carefully, tenderly, scooped Liam into her arms. He was terrifyingly light, his skin hot and dry, but he was breathing alive. Sarah was instantly at her side, expertly offering the bottle of warm formula. Liam, after a moment's hesitation, latched on with a surprising, desperate strength. Imani watched, a statue of grief, as David gently wrapped Liam in the soft blanket. Kale stood silently beside her, a massive, stoic guardian, his earlier aggression replaced by a quiet, watchful dignity. There were no more roars, no threats. Only a heavy, poignant silence filled the clearing, broken only by Liam's soft, suckling sounds. As Anya, David, and Sarah carefully, slowly retreated with their precious burden, Imani remained, watching them until they disappeared into the green embrace of the trees. Then, with a long, shuddering sigh that seemed to carry all the sorrow of the world, she turned and slowly, heavily, rejoined her troop, melting back into the ancient, emerald depths of her rainforest home. Liam was immediately airlifted to a specialized pediatric unit in a major city, the equivalent of being flown to Boston Children's Hospital or CHOP. He was critically dehydrated, severely malnourished, and battling a secondary infection. But his will to live, perhaps bolstered by weeks of Imani's fierce protection, was incredibly strong. Under round-the-clock expert care, he began the slow, arduous journey back to health. His rescuers, Dr. Anya Sharma and Ranger David Miller, found themselves at the center of an unexpected media storm. The story of the gorilla's baby captivated hearts and minds around the globe, a poignant headline in a world hungry for miracles. Back in the Kivu National Park, the extraordinary incident served as a powerful catalyst. International attention brought increased funding for gorilla conservation, strengthened anti-poaching patrols, and fostered a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the profound emotional intelligence and complex social lives of these magnificent primates. Imani's troop, now legendary, received enhanced, though still respectfully distant, monitoring. Imani herself, in time, would likely find solace and eventually mother again. But the memory of the small, strange, hairless infant she had so fiercely cherished, so painfully relinquished, would forever remain an indelible part of her life, a unique and poignant chapter in the oral history of her troop, passed down in ways humans might never fully comprehend. Liam, of course, would grow up with no conscious memory of his first, extraordinary protector. His early weeks of life would be a hazy, dreamlike blank. But he would be told the story again and again, a modern legend, a family heirloom of unbelievable provenance. He would learn of the grieving gorilla mother whose instinctual love bridged the chasm between species, of the dedicated humans who fought against time and nature to bring him home. His life, forever touched by the wild, would stand as a powerful, living testament to the unexpected bonds that can form in the most unlikely of circumstances, a reminder of a love that knew no boundaries, and of the gentle giant who, for a few precious, transformative weeks, called him her own, etching an invisible, indelible mark of the wild upon his human soul.